general public people as well.
And there are people from the general public on as well. Okay.
Correct.
All righty. Well, then I have 5:59 and 30 seconds. So that's probably close enough. I'm going to call this this meeting of the Bend Landmarks Commission for April 20th, 2021 to order. Roll call if we can go through. I see Robin Vora, Terry Shepard, Derek Stevens, Jim Figursky, Andy Coughlin, and Derek, are you, or David, you're there? There's
Yep.
David. Okay, so I believe we do have a quorum, Heidi?
Correct.
A quorum of commission members. It looks like to me, 1, 2, 3,
Everybody's here.
4, 5. Okay, we've got a quorum of commission members. All right. First thing then I'll do is I'll call for, are there anyone on the Zoom meeting from the general public with a comments on topics that are not on the agenda? Okay. Anybody out there?
I am not seeing any hands at this time, Mr. Chair. I'd like to remind the public that they can use the raise hand function if they want to provide public comment at this time, but I am not seeing anybody.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. If somebody does come in late or something like that and raise their hand, then we'll deal with that then. Third item on the agenda is approval of minutes for February draft minutes and March draft minutes. February draft minutes, I'm assuming everybody has had a chance to look over the February minutes. Are there any questions or comments about the February minutes?
They look very detailed. I mean, there were a couple places where the tenses changed from past to present and back to past in the middle, but I don't think that's that big a deal.
Okay,
Thanks.
and well, that happens when you jump in that TARDIS, that time machine, and you go, no, never mind. So then I will entertain a motion to accept the February minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion to accept the February meetings as presented. Meeting
Is there a
minutes as
second?
presented.
A second.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the February minutes as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. February minutes have been accepted. March draft minutes have also been presented to us. I trust that everybody's had a chance to look those over. Any questions or comments, additions to the March draft minutes that you would like to bring up? David, you're muted.
Thank you. I did have one comment, and that is it was officially after the meeting ended. We had a slight ex parte communication that affects the applicant, this month's applicant. And the video was clipped. So I don't know. I'm not going to make an objection to the minutes, right? But
Okay.
somehow, like going forward, if there is something like that that is caught on video, it should remain part of the record. Going forward.
Okay. One of the things that I can do then when we bring meetings to an end is really pound my gavel real hard and say the meeting is over. And so then anything after this point on is extraneous and will not show up into the minutes. Okay. And so we'll make that very, very clear from here on out. And that's my responsibility. So then if there are no other questions about the minutes, comments, then I will entertain another motion. I'm doing a lot of entertaining tonight.
I move to accept the March minutes as presented.
It has been moved by Commissioner Figursky to accept the March minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second Robin.
Okay, and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Hearing none, then the March minutes have been accepted and are no longer draft, but are the minutes of the meeting. Hang on just a second.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay, you got that, Heidi? Everything you need?
Yes.
All right, that moves us on to, let's see, number 4 item on the agenda, public hearing PLHIS 202-10296, applicant of the Winey Family Trust et al. In the 606 Northwest Congress Street, Bend, Oregon. The application is for the remodel and rehab of the property at 606 Congress. Okay. Let me go ahead and get started with our statement for public hearings. Okay. This is a de novo hearing and is an initial evidentiary hearing of application PLHIS 202-10296. This application is a request for changes. It's a changes of a pending application. The original application proposal materials are located in City File PL 20-0939. This modification of a proposal that we looked at 2 months ago, there was enough changes to warrant a separate hearing on the new proposal. Burden of proof. The applicant has the burden of proving that he or she is entitled to the approval sought. The applicable criteria for this application include the Bend Urban Area Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 3 and Chapter 10.20, Historic Preservation Code, and the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. Hearings procedure. Testimony and evidence at this hearing must be directed toward the criteria set forth in this staff report or other criteria in the Bend General Plan or Bend Development Code that you believe is applicable for or any other criteria in the National Register of Historic Places program that any person believes apply to this decision. Failure on the part of any person to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford the Landmarks Commissions and parties to this proceeding an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the City Council or Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Additionally, failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the Landmarks Commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Our order of presentation. The hearing will be conducted in the following order. The staff will give a report. The applicant will then have an opportunity to offer testimony and evidence. Okay, and the applicant will have the time they need to make their presentation as long as we keep it to a reasonable amount. Proponents of the application will then be given a chance to testify and present evidence. Those proponents who are not the applicant will have a maximum of 5 minutes. When all proponents have testified, opponents to the appeal will then be given a chance to testify and present evidence. After both opponents to the project will also be limited to 5 minutes apiece. After both proponents and opponents have testified, the applicants will be allowed to present rebuttal testimony, but may not present new evidence. At the Landmarks Commission's discretion, if the proponents presented new evidence on rebuttal, opponents may be recognized for rebuttal presentation as well. At the conclusion of this hearing, the staff will be afforded an opportunity to make any closing remarks. The commission may limit the time period for presentation. At that point, then I will close public hearing. Continuances before the close of the hearing, any person has the right to request an opportunity to present additional evidence, argument, or testimony regarding the application. If the hearing is continued or the record left open, the applicant shall also be allowed at least 7 days after the record is closed to all other parties to submit final written arguments, but no new evidence in support of the application. All right, now conflicts of interest. Do any of the commissioners have any ex parte contacts, prior hearing observations, biases, or conflicts of interest to declare? If so, please state the nature and extent of those. Commissioners, anything to declare?
Sure, yeah.
Commissioner
At
Funchen.
the end of last month's meeting, Commissioner Fagursky and I had a heated exchange, which would fall under an ex parte communication about this applicant tonight. In that exchange, and that again was heated, I told Commissioner Fagursky that he had applied a wrong standard from Old Town to Drake Park, at which point he replied, it's the applicant's fault for bringing a project, bringing such a big project. That, I bring that up as an ex parte, first because it's an ex parte conversation about it. Two, the applicant should know it. And three, it's going to go to a lot of things that we're going to talk about tonight in our work meeting, specifically about unconscious bias. And having said that, that is the ex parte conflict that I was part of.
Okay, and you were part of that. And as far as the work session, some of the things that you just stated, we will go ahead and put into the work session.
Correct.
And we'll deal with that at that time. Commissioner Fagursky, do you feel that exchange, the conversation that you had with Commissioner Funchen would constitutes a bias, or for some reason you can't make a informed decision on our project in front of us tonight?
No. One, I would not characterize the discussion as heated. It is the role of this commission to discuss issues. Commissioner Funchen was applying or attempting to apply a certain criteria. I felt that the application submitted at the time, because it contained multiple options, was confusing, and that the applicant's purported expertise on other design commissions and historic commissions and experience in the architecture community should have known better than to present that many options and ask this commission to choose which one we wanted.
Okay.
That's why I asked for an extension, or suggested that the hearing be continued so that the applicant could clarify their wishes in proceeding with modifications and then come back to the commission.
Okay.
I think that's the role of the commission to present that. And I would have to say that there are biases both for and against. Commissioner Funchen thought that we should approve, or expressed the thought that we should approve this because the applicant was a fellow in the American Society of Architects. And
those
that had no bearing really on the hearing.
Okay, and those kinds of issues are the things that we're going to put that are on the agenda for our work session that maybe we can very calmly and civilly hash out later on tonight. Probably most importantly, though, directing right at the applicant, does any party wish to challenge any commissioner based on ex parte contacts, biases, or conflicts of interest?
Mr. Chair, I have another ex parte contact to disclose. Is
Okay. All right.
this the right time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I did walk around the street and look at the property from the street and from the alley once since the last appearance. Also, with all this talk about fellow and American Institute of Architects, I discovered that the applicant's company, which is a very large architecture firm, is actually a client of mine on a project in San Diego, but it has no contact and probably doesn't even involve the applicant at all. So I would suggest that I could still be involved in discussion.
Okay, you can be involved in discussion, but as an alternate, and we do have a
Yes.
quorum of commissioners, but as an alternate, you will be involved in discussion, but you will not have a yay or nay vote. I got that right?
Agreed.
I think I got that right. Okay.
Agreed.
All right, thank you. Let me go back again to the applicant. Oh, Commissioner Shepherd. Terry, hi.
Thanks. Since this is a modification of a pending application, even though it's a new hearing and I was not part of the February meeting, I will likely exclude myself from the conversation. I'm an alternate, so I wouldn't vote anyway, but I'll listen in, but I likely will not participate in the conversation since I wasn't part of the first one.
And we certainly do appreciate your investment of time in this project and your willingness to bear with us and move right along down the stream. Okay, thank you, Terry. One more time, applicant. Again, do you wish to make any challenges of any commissioners? I don't hear any. Our applicants are there. One?
Yes, Mr. Chair, they're here. They should be able to turn on their microphones and their.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I thought you guys had to unmute us. So no, we have no problems. We're good.
Okay, all right, thank you. Then we will move on with our staff report. Heidi Kennedy, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you everybody for attending this evening. For the record, my name is Heidi Kennedy. I'm the staff planner for this application. This particular application is a modification of a pending application request. The proposed changes to the pending application are substantial enough to require a new public hearing. The original application materials are located in a separate file, city file PL-20-0939, in an attempt to make sure that the materials do not get confused and are completely separated. This application request is in file number PL-HIS 2021-0296. So this modification of the pending application request includes the proposal to reduce the height of the original proposed main addition, enlarge the existing garage structure to accommodate two cars, and to clarify the type of windows and roof finishes to be used in this application proposal. And so, like I said, in order to minimize the confusion between all the documents that have been going on with this over the two public hearing process, there are two separate online files. The application criteria that were used include the Bend Preservation Code and the Bend Development Code for process for this modification request. Since writing the staff report, staff has received, as of this afternoon, one email comment from a neighbor, Mr. Doug Knight, and I was able, as soon as I got it in the in my email list, I forwarded it to the applicant as well as the commissioners. I'm hoping that he is here this evening to maybe summarize the email. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at it, but I just wanted to say that's the one written comment I've gotten in response to this modification of pending application. Staff's recommendation is listed on page 17 and 18 of the staff recommended report. And this is what I'd like to say. The staff finds that the proposal has been significantly modified to be more compatible with the existing home than the original application proposal. The east addition has been lowered by approximately 4 feet in height, which is much more compatible with the original home in regards to the massing and scale. Many of the proposed construction details have been modified as well. For example, the proposed original copper shingles for the roof material on the additions have been modified to wood shingle roof material. The windows are a more traditional style than the original proposal. The original glass hallway connections have been modified to include divided light panels as part of the glass connections. The proposed additions do not appear to include a similar eave or roof overhang or corbels or exposed rafter tail design similar to the existing dwelling. Although the proposed and existing roof pitches are not called out, it appears that the proposed roof pitches of the additions are similar to the existing main dwelling. So staff finds that the proposed additions and some of the materials proposed with the modified plans are much more compatible to the historic home and fit in better than the existing home, with the existing home and to the context of the surrounding district than the original proposal that the commission saw in February. If the new construction included additional historic elements or designs such as roof eave overhangs, corbels, and designs in the materials and the design of the additions were included, similar, then staff believes that the proposed new construction would be more compatible with the appearance and character of the structure and the district. But I understand that determining whether a project is compatible and fits into the context of the surrounding district, but different enough to not duplicate the form and detailing in such a way that compromises the historic character of the building is subject to interpretation. I think that that was obviously part of the discussion in the February public hearing. So staff recommends that the commission consider whether or not additional historic elements or designs should be included in the plans with this new addition, the modified proposal. If the commission approves this request, and then I have included in the staff recommendation additional conditions of approval, which are listed on page 18 and 19, and they include our standard details checklist, which we will include with any decisions. I have the second recommended condition is approval of a variance to the setback standards because of the proposal to expand the garage, which is non-conforming now. With this modification, the proposal includes expanding the garage and also doing another bump out on the addition that's going closer to that big large tree on the alley. And so staff recommends that an arborist recommendations be followed and that an arborist be on site when they're doing major construction work for the proposal if it's approved. And another standard condition that's in all of our reports is that if there's going to be any major changes once you're out there working on doing the construction work, that any changes be run by staff and have staff aware of what's going on and if there are modifications to any approval from the commission. And that's all I have for my staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Heidi, for the report and for the thoroughness of your staff report for tonight's meeting. Are there any questions about the staff report for Heidi from any of the commissioners?
Yeah, I have I'm sorry. I have a question.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah. Heidi, how does the interface with the Planning Commission variance work with your second condition of approval?
It's an administrative review for doing any kind of variances. And similar to the one that the commission looked at last summer down on Sizemore, I think it was. If the commission is supportive of variance for the and finds that the variance meets the preservation code, I think that that's just fine. It's more of a formality. It would be strongly supported of variance. It does require a land use decision administratively. So.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question,
Mhm.
Andy? Okay.
Yes, it does.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Any other questions for staff? Robin? Unmute yourself, Robin. You're muted, Robin.
I see it. Okay, sorry about that. Hey, three quick questions, just to make sure I understood. The large tree in the back, I think it's in the back, um, is not a concern. I mean, do you feel it can be protected?
The applicant put in an arborist report and a modification report, but since those reports were created, the plans have changed slightly. That includes expanding the garage, and it includes a bump out on the addition that wasn't part of the original proposal. So it's a small, slight changes, and that's why I would recommend that the arborist be on site, because from what the arborist looked at, they didn't feel like they had a concern or issues with the proposal, the original proposal.
Okay. And then the second one, I take it based on your recommendations that this project may not comply with the city code for about roofs. That roofs on new additions shall be of forms that are compatible with the historic building and the historic character of the district. There's enough discrepancy.
Well, the original proposal was for copper roofing, and they've changed that to shake shingles. And as long as the shingles are treated and meet building code requirements, that would be fine. That is a traditional style roof that was part of the district, that was part of historically construction in the district.
But the gable part and all that you referred to may or may not.
The eave overhangs, the design. I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the materials of the roofing.
No,
Sorry.
no. Yeah, so yeah, that was changed too, but basically
Okay, sorry.
so at least on that point, there might be some discrepancy with the city code.
Well, it's a subjective call on, fitting in and not trying to copy the main home, and that's what I was calling out in the
Okay.
design, yeah.
Then, and the third question, Mr. Knight, we're going to talk about that later, I think, but raises the question of window proportions and types of windows. You didn't find that to be an issue when you looked at the modification.
I thought that, I called that out as well, in the subjective design of the details on the drawing. I think the massing and the scale are a lot better. I think that if it were more designed, more similar to the existing home, as far as those details, it would be more compatible. But I understand that's a very subjective call, and that's why I'm leaving it up to the commission to decide, where that line in the sand is between, copying, trying to copy it and versus being compatible.
Compatible, which is our job.
Yeah.
Thank
Any other
you.
questions, Robin?
No, thank you.
Okay, are there any, did you get your questions answered? Robin?
Yeah, it's not a black and white answer.
No, it is not. One of the things I've come to realize is everything we do is not black and white. That's an editorial comment on my part, I guess. Are there any other questions for Heidi, for Ms. Kennedy?
Mr. Chair, I got one.
David, was that you?
That was me.
Okay.
Heidi, how long is now I've got two questions. One, is anyone else experiencing a massive latency lag on this call? And two, Heidi, how long does that land use planning for the variance take?
Heidi, you're muted.
Yeah.
I'm not experiencing a lag right now on the meeting. And a variance application administratively is 4 to 6 weeks.
And something that we'll need to go through. Is anybody else experiencing a lag? Juan, are you detecting a technical glitch or anything like that? Okay,
I
thank
am
you.
not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, David, if you need something repeated, make sure you let us know that you need it repeated. Okay. All right.
I'm gonna drop off and get back on real quick. So.
Okay. All right. Applicants, Your turn. Burner proof is on you, so go ahead, fire away.
Yeah, so, well,
Let's see if we can make this, keep this.
yeah, I'd like
reasonable.
to, Jerry, I'd like to try to keep this as relatively tight as possible, but
Mhm.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that it's our intent, my intent and Iris's intent, to really make this a wonderful property. And, you know, you guys need to know that I am a preservationist at heart. That's what, you know, that's kind of work that I've done in the past. And, you know, this is a unique building because unlike, you know, another house in the neighborhood that might be an arts and crafts bungalow, that isn't on the National Historic Register, this one is.
Mhm.
So I find myself a little bit at odds because in some of the positions that Heidi was just talking about in terms of the detailing of the home, in many, many instances, in most instances, in fact, that would be my position of what needed to be done. But this is different. This house is different than a house that is in a historic neighborhood and an older bungalow. This is a distinctive house that has been recognized for a specific reason. And therefore, the way that we go about designing the additions to the home really makes a big difference. And I do think that there are some things that are somewhat at odds, if you will, between what is expected in Bend in terms of the historic district and what the Secretary of Interior guidelines are for homes that are on the National Historic Register. So why don't we just start with the main home first, and then we'll move around to the garage and then the additions. So the main home, as I say, is going to be a complete restoration. It will be impeccable in the way that we do it. All of the foundations, as you guys know, are being restored to the original dry lay design. The building is obviously up in the air right now. We're redoing the foundations. We're not using a veneer stone. We're using a full thickness stone in lieu of veneer. And we're using local stone that's going to be laid in a pattern that is exactly the same as the original design. The Congress elevation will be identical to the original design. The only change is the front steps, which were added later. They were never stone, they were actually wood, and they'll be reconstructed in wood as per the original design.
Mhm.
So if we move to the Kansas Street elevation, that will remain essentially the same. The contemporary window that you see will be removed, and two original windows that were moved from the side of the house to the back elevation is going to be relocated and restored. There was actually a sun porch on that addition at one time. And when that sun porch was added, the windows were moved to the back, and you can see it all in the original framing. And we went over that in detail last time.
Yes.
All of the windows, the detailing, everything's going to be completely restored. The pulleys, the chains, even glass that has been replaced over the years. I'm going to go back and we're going to replace it with the same vintage. It won't be, you know, it won't be newer slump glass. It will be the older slump glass. So that house in every way will be exactly the way that it was originally intended. You can actually see the sun porch here that was added at one point and then taken off. So that's the main house, the Putnam house. Now let's move on to the garage. I'd have to say that the process that we went through last time was really helpful to me as an architect, and Iris and I as the owners. And that I think ultimately we ended up with a much better design. We had some real serious issues, I thought, in terms of massing, and I think those have been rectified. So why don't we move to the garage side of the house? So this is the existing garage, and as you know, one of the primary problems we had is you couldn't get cars in that garage because the doors weren't wide enough. The garage wasn't deep enough to be able to accommodate a car. And so consequently, that forced us into putting a garage somewhere else on the site, which changed the massing of the addition that was proposed. So after our discussions in our last meeting, what we're proposing is to slightly widen the existing garage and take it deeper by about 3 or 4 feet. What that did is it allowed us to take the addition in the back that had a car park underneath it, a garage underneath it, and drop it, as you can see it here, by almost about 4'9", about 4 foot or so. And you can see that it makes a huge difference in terms of the massing of the addition, of the master bedroom addition as compared to the main house. And that's exactly, from a historic standpoint, what we should be doing. As a side note, you guys were talking about the tree in the back. We're very sensitive to that. I have Chris Madison from Madison Tree Care. He's been going to the site weekly. He's looked at the back tree condition, and there's a slab back there right now with a retaining wall. And he feels that we would have virtually no disruption to the existing tree. In fact, taking out the slab and moving the retaining wall will give that tree more room. Right now, it is the only tree on the site that's showing a little bit of distress. So the intent with the garage is to take all of the component parts, every part of the garage, and reuse it and expand it slightly so that we can turn it into a 2-car garage. But as they say, all the materials will be reused. It is not, in my mind, I don't want it to be a tear down. I want to be able to use as much of it as we can. The garage is currently sitting on dirt, so there will have to be a small foundation that will have to be added. There are 2 wood floors that are currently in the garage. Our intent is to actually reuse the wood from the wood floors. So we'll use every part and piece of that garage that that we can. So moving on to the master bedroom addition, I don't want to quote the Secretary of Interior guidelines for structures on the National Historic Register, but because I have a whole slew of information that I've been going through, and I've been reviewing it from day one on this project. But it says that one of the key aspects of it is that an addition needs to be readily distinguishable from the older work, harmonious in scale, proportion, materials, and color. But the new work should not replicate and should be distinguishable from the old in appearance. Otherwise, it may not be possible to identify the old from the new. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole array of other things that I could go through, which I don't think is really relevant, but it does say what is not recommended in the Secretary of Interior guidelines. What is not recommended is duplicating the exact form, material, style, detailing of the historic building in the new addition so that the new work appears to be historic. And I recognize that that is at odds potentially with the historic district of Bend. And quite frankly, I think most of the work, as I said before, I would have duplicated the main house. But this house is on the National Historic Register, so I think it's subject to design considerations that are different than what one might be doing if they were doing an addition on, say, another house in the neighborhood. So going to the master addition, we'll just talk about it briefly. The addition was reduced in 4 feet in height. That significantly reduced the massing of the structure. Stay with that other elevation for a second. Go back, Honus. This allowed us, and I think Mr. Knight actually brought this up in the last meeting. This did a couple of really wonderful things. It allowed us to match the pitch of the addition to the main house. It allowed us to match the dormers in a way that's consistent with the main house. So the massing in the structure is better. And then we also went back with the den addition and matched the same pitch to the main house as well. So I think all in all, it worked out to be a much better solution. The one other thing I would like to cite is we did talk a lot about the length. And one of the things that the historic code says is that if the addition was torn down, it should have as a minimal amount of impact on the main house, and the main house should stand on its own, and the addition should really be a backdrop to the main house. And it specifically says that one of the ways to actually handle an addition on a home on the National Historic Register is to do it with what they call a hyphen. And a hyphen is a break. So a hyphen is a break between the main house and the addition. And that's exactly what we've done here, is we have a small little hyphen when it comes to the addition, and then we also have a hyphen as it pertains to the master bedroom addition. So Honus, if you could go to the front elevation. It also allowed us, you can see that this is an older image of the addition as it stood with the previous massing. Because we were able to drop it down, this is the way it currently looks. So you will not be able to see the back addition as far as the den is concerned. So all of the roof pitch, the break between the main house and the addition, everything that we've done, I think, is consistent with the code and will ultimately be two very simple buildings or two structures that really show off the main house. And that's really what we're trying to do here. We want the eye, we want the attention to go to the main home. Now, as far as the materials are concerned, we did take everything that you all talked about into consideration, and we are going to make the materials compatible, meaning that the foundation that we're using on the main home will be carried through on the additions. The cedar siding that is currently on the house that will be replaced because it's obviously in significant disrepair. We will use the same cedar siding on the additions. The cedar roof material, which will be fire retardant, will be the same material that we will be using on the additions. The window profiles will match all of the window profiles on the main house. So all the profiles themselves, we are not matching the exact size of the panes of the windows on the main from the main house, but we are doing what is proportional and I think in keeping with the way that the lights have been shown on the main house. So all of the detailing, the window trim, the siding, the roof material, all of that will be consistent with the Putnam house. The only difference is going to be the garage, which is not on the National Historic Register, but is considered to be a contributing structure. We will use all of the materials on that. The siding will be replaced with a horizontal siding that is absolutely in keeping with what one sees throughout the historic district in the neighborhood. So that will be the only structure that will be different in terms of the siding. The materials for the roof, again, will be exactly the same. We did, in anticipation of the conversation that we're going to have tonight, we did provide an alternate scheme. And I appreciate the criticism by giving commission too many choices, but there was such a the conversation about the fenestration on the windows were so important that what we're proposing and what we're showing here is what we prefer and we think is what is appropriate. But we did provide an option to break the windows up, and you see it here. This option that you see the fenestration on the master edition is very similar to the double hung windows on the main house. It's devoid of any breaking up of the lights themselves. The upper dormer does pick up the upper story of the Putnam house, and we did break those windows up. But we do have another scheme that actually breaks it up further, that breaks it into multiple lights, both on the lower level and the upper level. We think that both of these work. However, the scheme that we're presenting is the one that we think is the most appropriate, for the design of the home. So I think that's it. Hopefully that was concise enough. I have a whole bunch of other things that we could talk about, but I think at this point, that's probably gives you guys enough to be able to open up the conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any specific relevant questions for the applicant?
Yeah, this is Robin again.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask just the same three questions asked Heidi, just in a slightly different way. But one, I assume based on what you said, Mr. Winey, you would have no problem with an arborist report on that tree?
No, actually, just so everybody knows, I have an arborist, Chris Madison, as I mentioned. He has been helping me from day one. He was out on the site. I have him coming out every week Chris was out at the site on Saturday, and I talked to him and the general contractor. He is very pleased with everything that we've been doing. So we have been following his direction to the letter, and I'll continue to do so. I don't want to lose those trees. I want to make sure that it's done right,
Okay.
and he's been a good consultant for us.
Okay,
If
so
I
he'd
can
be,
also chime
Robin?
in.
Well, I think, Robin, you had a couple more?
yeah, I just wanted to say, so you're saying that he can provide that letter Heidi's looking for.
Yes, yes, of course, yeah. he will.
Okay, and then on the windows, I guess there's one you prefer, and by the way, I do appreciate what you've done. I think, you mentioned last time you wanted it to be really different from the main house, and you cited the national
Mhm.
direction on that, but I like what you've done here too. A little more for my eyes. I'm not an architect, but for my untrained eyes. The now on the windows, you're willing to go with either one of those alternatives you presented.
Yeah, I think it's it's one of these questions of compatible, but the answer is yes. And the only reason that we found this one to be more compatible is if you look at the main home, they're all double hung and the windows aren't broken up into multiple lights, but they are in the second story in the dormer. So we tried to reflect the same approach to the architecture in the addition as the Putnam house.
Okay, and then getting to the gable rafters and the corbel knee braces, and you haven't talked much about that, and you heard Heidi's recommendations.
We could look at, I think the bottom line is that if you guys told me to make it exactly like the main house, quite frankly, I could make it so much like the main house that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the main house and the addition. But I don't think I don't think as an architect, and especially, given the nature of this particular home, that that's the right approach. I think that something more simple, a backdrop, something that does not compete with the main house is the right way to go. But if you came back and said, look, this is what we got to do, I would certainly do it. I don't want this to be contentious. I don't think any of these things need to be contentious. I want to do what's right for the neighborhood and ultimately create a piece of architecture and design that I think that I'm not only proud of, but the entire neighborhood is going to want to be proud of.
Thank you.
Robin, you have your answers? Other questions then? Other questions from commissioners? No other questions for Daniel from the other commissioners? Okay, then at this time, is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of the project? Is there anybody out there who would like to speak in favor and supporting the project?
And I am seeing one community member, Mr. Chair. We have Joshua Heseltine. Joshua, I have provided you the ability to unmute yourself. Please proceed with your public testimony.
Please state your full name and before you give testimony, and then you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I get 5 minutes. That's great. I don't need 5 minutes. I live at 640 Northwest Congress, just up the street from this property. I'm fully supportive of what they're trying to do.
Okay, and for the record, state your name, please.
Joshua Heseltine.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for keeping it within the time limit. Is there anyone else, member of the public, who would like to speak in favor of the proposal?
Yes, Mr. Chair, next we have Kevin English.
Okay.
Kevin, we have provided you the ability to unmute yourself. Please proceed with your comment. First name, last name for the record, please.
Okay,
And
my name is Kevin. My name is Kevin English. I live at 624 Northwest Congress Street, the house directly to the north of the existing project. I, like Joshua, am fully in support of the project as presented here tonight. We have worked with Dan and his wife Iris for about the last 6 weeks with them regarding the excavation, and they have been more than helpful on every issue that we have raised. They are a wonderful couple to work with, and I have complete faith in this project as it is. So we fully support what they're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your input and for keeping it within the time frame. Are there any other members of the community who would wish to speak in support of the project? Okay, Juan, nobody?
I am not seeing anybody else at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And then now I'll switch over. Is there anyone out there who would like to speak in opposition of the project?
And I am not seeing any hands at this time, Mr. Chair.
There is no one out there wishing to speak in opposition of the project. Okay, so then we're at a point. Proponents have testified, opponents have given their chance to give testimony, and opponents have been given a chance to give testimony. Okay. No new evidence, so no for rebuttal. All right. So then any other questions of the applicant from commissioners, relevant questions about applying standards? Well, then the public input part of this hearing is closed. Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
I don't see Mr. Knight here. He's the one who did write an email in there and submit an opposition. I just wanted to make that for the record. I was hoping he might be able to speak tonight and to summarize his email. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to review that.
It was sent out to all the commissioners?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. All right. That's all I had to add.
Then public input on this issue is closed. All right. I would like to go around the room and give each commissioner 2 minutes for their thoughts. Okay. We'll start with Commissioner Figursky.
Great.
2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to start by applauding the resubmittal. I think one of my criticisms of the original submittal and one of the reasons behind it was that with so many options on the record, that any conditions we would have had to add would have been so cumbersome and clouded that it would have been difficult for anyone to really follow in the record. This is a much clearer and concise application. I did say, Mr. Winnie, that you might have known better with your experience. I did get the impression from Commissioner Funchen that he thought because you were a fellow in the AIA that you were infallible. I told him, as a fellow in the American Society of Landscape Architects, I know fellows are not infallible. I applaud, as I said, I applaud this new submission. I'm sort of on the fence either way with the addition of the braces and corbels to the addition. I have worked on historic buildings, and I understand the National Register. It's compatible, but should be discernible as not original. And I think what you've presented is a good example of that. So I applaud you. I do have a couple of comments on the plan, the tree protection plan that was presented in the file. The large ponderosa in back on that drawing is indicated as a 2-inch caliper tree, as the adjacent trees are indicated as 4-inch caliper. I don't know who did the drawing. It doesn't have your title block on it, but that should be corrected. I also note that on the site plan A101, that large ponderosa does not show up, nor does the other tree. It doesn't show up. And again, going back to the tree protection plan, what is shown as it's listed as wall and site protection fencing, looks more like erosion control placement than protection, because the fencing really does nothing to protect the root zone of the trees from compaction during construction. The arborist report could do that with recommendations as to how to proceed in terms of placing of plates and just, designating construction access routes. So I will be later asking for or suggesting as a condition that those plans be revised and submitted with the application. And I'm happy to review those with staff independent of another hearing. So.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I did not mean to limit commissioners to 2 minutes. That was an error and a slip on my part.
Oh, well, then I'll go
Andy?
on. No.
Andy, comments? And you're speaking
Yeah.
particularly to the rest of the commission.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I would say that as it relates to our historic code in the city of Bend, that particularly the change that has been made to lower the addition, the master bedroom addition, is an aspect ratio more compatible and a roof pitch more compatible with the existing building. I will note on the question of materials and on the question of overhang and gable overhangs that there are many examples in our district of historic homes that have very little roof overhang, and that such a structure added to our district as a new build, as a new addition, is not necessarily incompatible with our district, and it is compatible with a variety of other homes in the district. The materials, again, I think that we may have been hard pressed to find a roofing material similar to what was proposed for the prior application in February, with are already existing within our district. But the proposed roofing materials and the materials that are submitted now appear to be more compatible, and we can find examples of them within our district. In my opinion, this hits it threads the very small needle eye that is showing some amount of contrast to the existing historic building, and still being compatible with the neighborhood so as to not stick out like a sore thumb. One thing I would like the commissioners to kind of talk about, and perhaps this is a variance, is I do think that there might be a discrepancy with the garage and to what extent it is encroaching on the 5-foot setback. It seems to be a mismatch between sheets A101 and A102. So I just think we should bring that up, or bring that at least to Heidi's attention.
All right, Heidi, did you get that? Okay. Derek, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, first, just wanted to point out for Commissioner Fergus, the 42-inch Ponderosa is noted on the plan on A101. It's just behind the Rose Garage. The idea of the open tails versus the closed box, the corbels and all of that, I agree completely with the applicant. Having worked on National Registry properties around the country, you do not want to bring in a sense of false historification. You don't want to, yes, you can match. You could make something exact and have it blend and be perfect. I think that the applicant has kept the National Registry standards in mind and has applied them to this. While it may be more harmonious to have open tails on all structures and have similar materials and all of the same details, this design does present itself that were it to be sold in the future and someone wanted to restore the original and landscape where it was, they can be snipped right off and there's no harm, no foul. And I find that to be within the code. I find it to be exactly what need be done to an historic home. I had a little bit of heartburn about the windows, the 6/1s on the second floor, the 1/1s on the first. But in looking at it and again applying the idea of not falsely historicizing, well, you can bring things close and there can be a nod towards the historic context. It is within the letter of the law and the code, and it is what should have been presented. I do not have a problem. I applaud the changes. I like the massing. I like the diminished height on the master suite. The couple of walls on the kitchen. You have a window from the street presentation side, non-presentation sides. The solids to voids. It's non-presentation side, and it creates a living space for the person to adaptively read the historic home. Given my concerns about the nebula of stars that we were able to pick from when it came to the first version of this, this is the plan as presented that can be worked with. That's my thought.
Thank you, sir. Robin, comments about the code and application to this project or about this project?
Yeah, I think, I think Derek brought up the main points that, there's a discrepancy between our code and apparently between that and the Secretary of Interior guidelines, which I don't have in front of me, but I'm assuming they've been cited correctly. That the an addition be, not match the main house, identically. But, but as Ian pointed out in our meeting yesterday, our job is the city's code. This does suggest that if we lean towards accommodating other guidelines such as Secretary of Interior guideline, we may need to modify this code. But the 10.20.130 code says that trying to find the right sections of it, but it talks about let's see, architectural elements of new additions shall be compatible with the historic building. On the roof, I cited that earlier. Roofs and additions shall be of forms that are compatible with the historic building. So both of those were deliberately not complied with by the applicant because he believes that the addition should not look the same. Which is also a valid point, but it doesn't match the city code, so that's a dilemma. In terms of the two window proposals that he made, to my untrained eye, I'm not an architect. The second one, if he's willing to go with it, looks a little, to me, more appealing than the first one. But I think they both are an improvement over the first presentation. And the applicant did make the same case of the first presentation that it should look distinctly different. But I think majority of the commissioners thought it was a little too different. Now we sort of have a compromise, and so I'm still mulling over my mind whether to what extent we need to stick with focused on the city code because it's not our role to look to have something different than is in the code.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Terry, comments?
Terry's abstaining.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry. I'm still here, but I'm not participating in tonight's discussion.
Okay, you're going to abstain from comment. And David, comments about the about preservation code, this project? Question or comments?
Thank you. Yeah, overall, I mean, I think that we could have, as a commission, gotten here faster for the applicant, but we got here. And by God, that'll be good enough. I think that the hyphen that the architect has talked about adding it in here, perfect example of complying with the national standards and the Bend Development Code.
Mhm.
And in terms of 1020-130 and compatible, right? I'll give you an example. My wife and I are complete opposites in risk profile, in personality, in everything. And yet we are totally compatible. So compatible doesn't mean that it is the exact look, you know, right down to the way that you dress. I think that the plan is excellent. I think that in 50 years, people will walk past and say, wow, that was the really old house, and then this is now the new old house. I think that it's well done, and I'm looking forward to seeing this project completed. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, and just for myself, something that we'll take a look at again in the work session, as I went through the preservation code to review for this project, there is an awful lot of, to the extent practicable, when feasible, there's an awful lot of broad language in our code. If at some point the City Council wants to take a look at that code again, there would certainly be it would certainly be within their purview. All right, all comments have been made. Then commissioners, I will entertain. Oops, Heidi Kennedy. Oh, you need to do a final.
Commissioner Figuersky has another comment.
Where'd you go? There you are. All right, Jim, go ahead. I missed
Yeah, just to acknowledge the fallibility of fellows. I did miss the circle of the tree trunk on A101. Poor resolution on a screen may be at fault, or bad eyesight. But as I zoomed in, the circle appeared. However, it is still labeled as a 2-inch caliber tree on the tree protection plan. So I appreciate Commissioner Stevens pointing that out for me. It may be the way the line weights are also just presented in the PDF format on my computer. But just quick comment, you know,
okay,
I think on the difference between National Historic Register requirements and local code, it may be something, you know, again, that the City Council and this commission and this board may talk about in terms of what happens when you have overlapping jurisdictions. I've been caught many times in land use applications between city, county, state, and federal regulations that don't play well together. So just something for further consideration.
Absolutely. We do have a counselor with us tonight, and perhaps the council somewhere down the road will take that up as an issue. All right, then, counselors, commissioners, I will entertain a motion.
Wait, I have one other comment.
Who was this?
If that's okay. This
is
Andy.
Andy, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I do now realize that A102 is a site plan alternative, and it appears to be one that is trying to comply with the site plan setback. So I from a historic perspective, I feel like pursuing the variance is preferable from a historic perspective, to not have to kind of cut away more or move more or preserve. It gives us the opportunity to preserve more of the contributing garage. So the A102 site plan. So sorry for that mistake. And then the second thing is that, Robin, I was trying to not interrupt, but you did, when you quoted the code, you said that, for example, roofs on new additions shall be of forms, parentheses, gable, hip, et cetera, that are compatible with a historic building, but you didn't say the end of that code section, which said, and the historic character of the district. So I do believe that given the context of the district, I don't see a mismatch here. I think you may disagree, but I just wanted to make sure we read the entire code section.
Okay, commissioners. All right. some of the things that I'm hearing now could be give and take after, or when we actually have a motion on the floor, motion and seconded when we talk about a motion. I will entertain a motion. Do I hear a motion of any kind? Derek?
I move that we accept the proposal as presented with all of Heidi Kennedy's conditions as spelled out in the staff report, and that the one variable, which was the garage position, I would put that the garage wall, which would be I guess that's the north wall, the alley wall, be where it is, bringing about the planning commission approval, of course, but leaving that non-compliant, as is the case in most of the historic districts. So.
Okay. And all right, so then the motion is to accept as presented with staff recommendations, and then one more recommendation from Derek as far as the garage wall. Could you repeat that for me, please? I didn't quite follow all of that.
Okay.
And Derek, real quick, I think that you can sum all that up with just Alpha 102 in the sheet A102 as shown in A102.
I think it's A101.
Okay. Derek, it was your motion. It was your motion. I hear these amendments to your motion being presented to you. If you would like to accept either one of them as friendly, or if you would like to go ahead and clarify your motion.
As Commissioner Function pointed out, the garage position, which was my additional condition of approval, is well represented on architectural sheet A101. So thank you for that, David.
Okay.
May I ask a clarification question of Commissioner Stevens?
Yes, you may.
I forget, I accidentally closed Heidi's report, but did she recommend the forms on the roofs, the gables and all that, the braces and all that be changed or not?
No, she did not.
Okay.
She suggested it for our consideration, but my motion reflects the fact that as a National Registry district, National Registry and national the standards adopted by the keeper are well covered in this plan.
Then Derek's motion was to accept as presented, with the one exception about the garage position as in Plan A101. Do I hear a second? Oops.
Chair, and staff recommendations as well.
Staff conditions, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You bet. Do I hear a second? Jim?
Chair, I would like to offer an additional condition, which is that the tree protection plan be revised to accurately reflect the trees and to reflect the arborist's report and recommendations. And I'm happy to review that with staff at a later date.
Derek, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
I do.
Okay.
It's also one of the staff's recommendations. She'll follow all arborist recommendations out in the protection plan. But if Commissioner Bogursky would like to solidify that a bit, I have no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I hear a second?
I will then second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded to accept the project as presented with the staff recommendations from Heidi's report, with the garage position as drawn in Plan A101 and a tree protection plan revision. And Commissioner Bogursky will work on the revisions.
Yeah, I'd like to offer an amendment, mainly just for discussion, perhaps. The applicant.
Well, if you're offering an amendment now, Robin, it would have to go to Derek as either a friendly or an unfriendly amendment.
It would be, I guess you could call it a friendly amendment. The applicant
That would be up to
presented,
Derek.
okay, yeah, he may view it differently. The applicant presented, he was willing to go with 2 options on windows. And personally, I like the second set better, but I don't know if that should be a condition. I just wanted to hear some discussion on that. One option would be to say an amendment would be to require the second set. Another would be to give the applicant a choice of going either way.
Okay, we are working on a motion. And so then your amendment would be to require the second option on windows. Derek, do you see that as a friendly?
I recognize the idea. My motion was actually in running with as presented and as expressed by the applicant as their preference, which was the massing of the more similar massing on the first floor to the 1/1 with the divided light on the second floor, which pays a better homage to the original home, in my opinion, than the divided light on the first floor.
Okay, so which option, was that the second option that Robin presented?
The second one was just to give the applicant the choice of going either way.
Derek,
I'm-
friendly amendment or not?
I would be disinclined to really, after given the fact that we have talked about trying to be very specific at what we hope to see, I would be disinclined to give an option if it is the preference of the commission to look at what we'll call option 2 on the windows, which are divided light on the first floor. Then that would be, after the motion is voted on, if it's struck down, it would be something that would be entertained in the following motion, I would assume.
Well, at this point, we can go ahead, and this is an unfriendly amendment to the motion. Is there a second on the unfriendly amendment? Hearing none, then the amendment fails. The motion still stands as accept as presented with the staff recommendation and the garage position as presented in drawing A101 and the tree protection plan with a revision. It's been moved and seconded. I got lost there.
Yes, it's.
Heidi, do I have a second?
Yeah.
We do have a second. Who seconded? Jim?
Jim,
I did.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Discussion of the motion.
I still think if we approve this, we need to, in our discussion later, talk about whether we want to propose an amendment to the city code so that we don't have to, have this discussion each time.
Okay, and Robin, I have absolutely no problem with a proposal of an amendment to the city code. I think some of us are starting to realize that the city code could certainly stand some looking over. It was written in, what was it, 2015, I think, something like that. So maybe we can take a look at that and make recommendations to the council. The other discussions of the motion. Derek?
no, I think that I'm very pleased with the change from the previous application to this.
Discussions on the motion. Any other discussions on the motion? Then I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oh my goodness gracious me. I think we've got a unanimous. Any opposed? We did it. Okay. Thank you very much, commissioners. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Again, accept the project as presented, staff recommendations, and the garage position and tree protection plan and a revision to it. Heidi, do you have all that? Then applicants, I thank you for your
Thank you. Thank
for
you
your
very much.
patience and for your perseverance. And just as my personal comment to you, I think it's going, from the drawings I've seen and after talking to you, I think it's going to be it could really be a very, very great looking project for the city of Bend.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, we
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. You know, this process,
plan on it.
the process is always difficult, but I think
Oh yeah.
when it was all said and done, I think we all ended up in a better place. And Jim, we do have steel plates all over the site to protect the trees. So anytime you want to go out there and meet me, I'd love to have your comments on, whether we're doing the right thing. But, I think we're pretty good right now. So,
Yeah,
Well, you
I
will
actually did see the steel plates. I just,
and the last
for
thing
record,
is, believe me, I'm the last person to think that architects are infallible.
we can talk
Well,
about
and
it later
you
too.
will have the arborist out there every step of the way.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Well,
will.
thank you
Good.
very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you
All
all.
right.
Okay.
Then, commissioners, that seems to be the end of our regular meeting business. Okay. Yes, no? I will entertain a motion then to adjourn the regular meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move.
To adjourn the regular meeting and maybe a 5-minute break in between.
Okay. Second on the motion to adjourn.
I second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn the regular meeting. Man, all those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. All right. 5 minutes. Meet you back in. I've got 7:20:16. Meet you back here at 7:25:16.
Thank you. See you soon.
Actually, that we got there. We got there. Yeah. Now I can pick up a whole bunch of this paperwork that's scattered out all over my desk. Jeez Louise. I am not one of the people who can go back and forth with the electronica. So I print everything out anyway, and so that I've got it here in front of me so that I can go ahead and make comments and write my notes on everything that I'm looking at. And you were concerned about one of those ponderosa pine trees in that backyard.
Yeah.
I think I accounted for a ponderosa pine tree today. I printed out so much.
Yeah, I typically download the PDFs and use an editor to mark up my comments directly on the PDFs.
And you know what, Jim, I've dealt with Heidi on this one, and she can give you any other details. But I have an iPad, and in order to go through the city's website and the PDFs, you need Adobe something or other.
Yeah.
And it is incompatible with iOS systems. And so I had to take the email that had the link to the new city site, send it over to my wife's email address, and open up the email on her Mac before I could even get. I'm beginning to question. Plus, my iPad is full. It was only 15 gigabyte, 16 gigabyte, and I'm beginning to question the wisdom of this iPad. Maybe it's time for me to get a real computer.
Yeah, well, I actually, my personal computer at home is an iMac, but what I'm on right now is it's a MacBook Air that's connected to a larger monitor, but it's running Windows because it has to run Windows to be compatible with the other computers in the office. The principals who, after I left, the principals who are there currently are all Mac fanatics and decided they were going to have Macs and that's what we would have. But as a concession to staff, we'd run Windows on
the Macs.
Yeah. So that's probably why I have some issues with resolution on PDFs. Sometimes it's just a matter of my waiting a few seconds for all the line work to resolve.
Right.
Because I've had these same issues. I review drawings for staff and, it's like, wait a minute, you're talking about something, but I don't see it anywhere on the plan.
Right.
Well, and if I zoom in, then all of a sudden the line work appears.
Yeah. same thing. My wife has a Mac Air, I believe it is, or Mac, something like that. Who keeps up with all that stuff? And when I was opening up the drawings and everything, I well, come on, open. That's it. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. It is. It's
Yeah.
just as slow as I am. So yeah, it's when you having Windows on a Mac is not a panacea either.
No. Well, and particularly all of our software is cloud-based.
Mm-hmm.
So I have Office, but it's in the cloud. And I have, all these graphic suites that are cloud-based applications, which
Mm-hmm.
good old days, when it was on my computer, I could customize it to my own preferences. Sometimes the updates that come from the cloud really
Mhm.
screw things up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm still looking for where the cloud is.
Yeah.
I'll see an app and it says in the cloud, and I'll look out the window.
Yeah.
Where's the clouds at? It's right.
When it tells me it's in the cloud, to me, that just, it's fuzzy. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not really there. It has no real substance.
No
per
real
se.
substance and far away.
Yeah.
Boy, man. One of the reasons
funny.
why I retired from teaching from the high school that I was teaching at when I did was there was rumors that the district was going to go to a new computer system for attendance and grades and those kinds of things. And that I said, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to learn another new system. No, I'm still a pencil and paper person.
My grandpa is an architect or was an architect, and he right at the time, probably even before AutoCAD, DataCAD was introduced. He was like, okay, I'm going to try to learn this new technology. And he signed up for a course at the community college, and he couldn't figure out how to even turn the computer on. And then he was like, you know what, I'm just going to retire. We're going to leave that technology to the next generation.
And Terry, I'm probably close to your grandfather's age. So I understand. I understand.
Yeah, I worked in some of the very first versions of CAD.
Yeah.
Where I had to manually input the surveyor's notes into the system. And the first computer I worked on to do CAD was a massive 286 processor with 4 whole megabytes of RAM.
And 4 megabytes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you thought it was huge.
10 times more powerful.
Yeah. The drafting shop at my high school, when we left in the spring one year, end of the school year, and the drafting shop was all the old boards up and everything like that. Came back in the fall and there was 4 computers on tables. And that was it, the whole drafting shop. That was the whole thing. I went, oh God, this has changed. Of course, that was in the 80s somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, how are we doing? We got everybody back?
Is this
Robin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
David, you there? Robin, are you there? Uh-oh. Robin got lost.
I'm here.
There we go. Robin, you're here? All right, great.
Eyes here.
Okay. Now I'm going to call our work session into order. And one of the emails that I believe you got was a breakdown of the kinds of topics for tonight's work session. I'm going to try to hold us to, all right, it's 7:28 right now. I'm going to try to hold this to 40 minutes, 45 minutes max, okay? So that means in all of the time frames that we have for the 4 different areas, we're going to need to cut down a little bit, okay? Because if what we don't get done tonight, we'll go ahead and rearrange and move into May's meeting. Just very quickly, one of the first places that I will cut down, okay, is, and Heidi, jump in here anywhere you want to, okay? I would just like to say that my goals for the workshop tonight I just want to say, when I came onto the commission, the membership had been together for a very long time. Some of them had been on the commission 10, 8, 9, 11, 12 years, and they had been together for that long. So it was very easy for me to slip into, learn the job, and become part of that team. They had already built their team. They had already gone through some of the things that needed to be ironed out. They knew each other really well. We've had a large changeover on this commission. And in fact, Robin and I are the only ones that are left from the old commission. And so we've had a lot of new faces and a lot of new folks come on, and a lot of new points of view. Okay. What I'd like to find out tonight are, very briefly, your motivation for coming on to the commission, your backgrounds, your outlook for the commission. What are your goals? What are your goals for as part of being a member of the commission? We'll do that next. Heidi, I'm sure you have some goals that you would like to iterate for us as well. And then hopefully everybody has their preservation code in front of them. And then we'll go ahead and the last part, talk about what we see as commission members. Now, Heidi is going to act as guide, herd, cattle prod, anything else to keep us moving. She is going to take notes, and she will use what we call a parking lot. If there's something that is an issue that you wish to discuss that is not being discussed at the time or not germane to tonight, Heidi will put it in the parking lot and we will come back to it at a later date. You have Scout's honor. I would go ahead and give the Scout presentation, but my fingers don't work that well anymore. I'm old. Anyway, okay. All right, Heidi, comments? None? All right. Well then, introductions and backgrounds, 3 minutes. Keep it to 3, folks. Don't run over. I'll start with Jim. Your background, what got you here, your areas of expertise, and I already know your landscape background and its value, believe me.
Well, thank you. Yes. I am a landscape architect. I've been licensed in Oregon since 1985. Have held licenses in California, Washington, Idaho, Arizona, and Missouri. I am a fellow in the American Society of Landscape Architects. That's one of 700 current active fellows out of a total of 1,270 that have been elected to that position since the society was founded in 1899. Half my career has been in the public service. Half my career has been in private sector. My specialties were, besides design and construction, is also land use and permitting. I've worked at city, county, state, and federal jurisdictions on a number of projects. I've served on 3 different design commissions, City of Tualatin, Clackamas County, and in various aspects in Portland. I've served, the 11 years on the Oregon State Board of Landscape Architects. I've also served on a board of directors for the national organization that creates and maintains the licensing exam for landscape architects. I'm here because I have a strong belief in the duty to serve. I have a strong belief as a landscape architect in the quality of life that site and environment bring. And I'm here because I appreciate what the preservation of significant resources in the community, both site and built, can mean to the livability of the community. While in Portland, I was at Portland Parks for 11 years. I renovated 8 community centers, including a couple that were historic and on the historic register. And I renovated or redid over 40 parks. And if you don't know Portland Parks and Recreation System, it was founded by the Olmsted brothers, who were Olmsted was founding father of landscape architecture in the US. And I was constantly working in historic environments, both in those community centers, having to redo one particular Selwood, which was all, the wiring was all knob and tube, and having to bring these things up to current codes, both seismic and building codes throughout the process. So, and I also just enjoy a good argument and discussion. So,
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Derek, you're up.
Sure. Well, I started as a historic builder in the late 70s and have been building old things, I guess, so to put it, for a long, long time. For a while in the 80s, I was the in-house designer for the 5th largest real estate firm in Boston. The holdings that we had at the time were all historic properties, including the Exchange Building, the Board of Trade Building, the Custom House Tower, things like that. The first high-rise in Boston, which was the Post Office Square Building, all 9 stories of it. After doing that, I came west and kept doing my love, which is working with old buildings. I did a number of loft conversions on historics in the Pearl District up in Portland, moved to Bend, and continued here by doing the house on Lava Road that has all hand-built 3/1 windows out of recycled bridge material from a Burlington Northern trestle, so that the grain was just right for the period of the house. Did the Bend Hardware Building down on Minnesota, across the street from Doug Knight's project at St. Clair Place. Won a beautification award for the Hudson Co. Building on Wall. Joined the Landmarks Commission in 02, 03, somewhere back there, and left in 2010, I think it was, 09 or 10, having been chair for a couple of years at that point. After the crash, I also lived in a historic home back at the time, the Arthur French House down on Lavin, Georgia. Lost that in a divorce, and since then I've stopped contracting. I'm just a materialman supplier. I build very odd bits out of wood, and quite often utilizing tools that date back to the 1830s that are here in my shop. I love it. Sawdust is made here, and it's fun.
Okay, super. Thanks, Derek. Terry, you're up.
Let me unmute here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Let's see. I'm from the Midwest originally. I studied technical communication and natural resources in school, but had kind of my whole focus of my education on environmental ethics. Back in 2016, I moved to Bend from Utah, where my husband went to grad school for architecture. And in Salt Lake, I lived there for about 16 years. I was an elected commissioner on the unincorporated Salt Lake County Community Council. So I've always kind of had an interest in public policy. As I mentioned earlier, I have architects in my family, and today I'm married to an architect who works at a local firm in Bend. So I'm really interested in public policy, and I kind of have a passion for land use, conservation, art history, archaeology. Personally, we've renovated an 1899 Victorian in Salt Lake City, and then
we lost Terry. She froze. Is there anything we can do from our end?
I wonder if we can come back to her.
We will come
a little bit.
We can come back to Terry as soon as she unfreezes. Andy, you're hitting cleanup.
Okay, well, I introduced myself recently, so I don't need to go over that. Licensed structural engineer and civil engineer in California, Oregon, Idaho, Florida, and Illinois. I've been practicing on a lot of government buildings at the beginning of my career. Worked on historic buildings at Pearl Harbor, buildings on Ford Island, which survived the attack in 1941. Worked on 50 UN Plaza, a Beaux Arts, or I think it's a Beaux Arts building in, probably not actually, in San Francisco. Worked on the Hoover Building, which is the U.S. Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C. But I really came to this not because of my practice. Right now, I don't really practice so much with historic art buildings. It's fairly rare. But right now, I came to it from the perspective that I felt like a current resident of the neighborhood needs to be represented on this commission. And I do live on Delaware, close to Hill Street. It's called the Whitaker House. And I've also been through the commission process to add a rear addition to my home in 2018, which had conditions put on it that we met, some of which we complained about, but ultimately we love the place where we live and we love the way that our project turned out. Yeah, my interest is really to keep this neighborhood a very historic and charming neighborhood, balancing it with the livability aspects and the aspects of what we're asking people to pay to comply with historic standards, and to encourage compliance and to discourage non-compliance.
Okay, thank you. Terry, would you like to finish your thought?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was. Sorry about that. I had to switch computers.
You're in Utah.
Yeah, so in Utah, I was actually, I was on the Salt Lake County Community Council, and I led community engagement and communications committees there. So I'm very interested in both public policy, conservation, and community engagement. So I'm probably not maybe your traditional landmarks commission person, although I have, an interest in the topic, and I have a lot of interest and experience in public policy. Professionally, by day, I'm a supply chain consultant. I've worked for Amazon for the last 5 years, recently left Amazon and started with a new company just this past year. I think I mentioned, I have just personally, I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, and my husband's an architect locally in town. And yeah, that's about it.
Any particular perspective for the commission?
Yeah, I think for me, when we talk about the role of the commission later on, I think we spend a lot of time, obviously, looking at planning commission applications and applying judgment to certain portions of, just new construction or, the modifications as indicated in the code. But I'd really like to see this commission also branch out a little bit into community engagement. And there's such a huge new population of folks in Bend. I really kind of live by the philosophy of be Bend, learn about Bend, know about Bend, walk the historic district. So many people I meet don't know about it, don't understand it. So I'm hoping that, we can really bring a community engagement angle to this and education, and get people excited, I guess, about Bend's history, is my personal perspective.
Okay, super. And that issue, that topic is one of our discussion questions or discussion areas for next month's work session. And thank you. I think, yeah, that's I like that. I like that idea. David?
You can hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, let me think. I did not grow up. I'm well off now, but I did not grow up that way. I trained for 3.5 years to join a special operations company in the U.S. Army. Trained for 3.5 years to go to the assessment and selection course, and got hit by an English guy driving on the wrong side of the road 3 weeks out. So Rehab, went back in as a military intelligence officer. Put myself through college with the Pell Grant and actually doing AutoCAD for the school that had a contract. I've been in construction since age 14.
Mhm.
I started a historic district in the city of Chicago by swapping a property that I was going to rehab for a 1895 Queen Anne. Ended up in the conference room of the planning department for the city of Chicago with the building commissioner. And at 10 o'clock, had a property that was zoned at 9:59. I was having coffee with them and had a property that was zoned R4. At 10 o'clock, the city council changed the zoning from R4 to R11. At 10:01, all of the plans were inputted. At 10:04, he signed off on the final, even though it still had yet to go to plumbing and heating and all the different departments. Ended up recreating that or adding on 110% more square footage to that 1895 Queen Anne, subdivided it out, and I still live there with my wife when I'm not in Bend. But everyone who knows me knows that I'm from Bend. I just had to move here to figure that out. So I live. There's an Irish adage that I live my life by, and that is a friend's eye is a good mirror. And the reason I'm on this commission is that the codes they need help, right? And the way that the codes are drawn right now, and the way that the commissions, what I see are approvals that range depending on the commission, who's on the commission at that time. Overall, it's making it very hard for people to age in their homes, and that is a big focus of why I am here.
Okay, good. And David stepped us into the second one area, or third area. Robin, as far as I know, you are one of the old timers
Yeah.
on the commission, not necessarily your age, because I know you're younger than I am.
I have been on longer than you.
Yes, you have.
I'm originally from Bombay, India. Immigrated with my family to the U.S. when I was 13. Home design was one of my favorite high school classes. And I actually was in the architecture school at UC Berkeley for 2, maybe 3 quarters. But that was back before computers, and I could not draw freehand. When the nudes posed for us, my drawing of them did not look anything like the person, and I was quite embarrassed. And so I went into natural resources and have bachelor's, master's degrees in that. Worked 39-year career with the U.S. Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service. Been in Bend since 2002. I've been, I think civic involvement is important, and I've been involved in a number of city committees, from urban renewal district to urban growth boundary expansion to, transportation. Involved with the Park and Rec Recreation District, and I'm currently a candidate for a position with the district. Not campaigning here, and I guess the opening on the Historic Landmarks Commission came at a time when I was kind of between some of those committees, and it seemed interesting, something I didn't know much about. I've always been interested in historic districts, historic homes, and when I go visit places, I often will, pull over and take a look at those kind of places. So I signed up. I offer a non-technical perspective. I'm not even married to an architect. And hopefully I can help with that. I think it is interesting. Procedurally, as I mentioned, we do have a little problem we need to work on with the next session on the code versus our independent thoughts on some issues as commissioners, because ultimately, as Ian said, we need to be enforcing the code. That's what, we're not the city council. We can't make independent decisions necessarily. So I hope we'll focus on that in our next session.
Okay, and that's what we'll be coming up to next as far as the discussion of the preservation code. Just real quick, high school teacher. I chased teenagers around for about 40 years. And then when I retired, I decided to jump out of the frying pan and in the fire. I was elected to the LeGrand City Council. If you don't know where LeGrand is, it's in the northeast corner of the state of Oregon. I've always thought that service to the community where I live is very important. Of course, that's part of being a teacher as well. In LeGrand, not only the city council, but budget committee, urban renewal, on and on and on. Moved here to Bend in 2015 and looked around and say, how do I serve Bend? So this opening came up. I got on Landmarks Commission. I also am president of the Central Oregon Nordic Club. I'm a neighborhood leader for the Democratic Party. I was chair of the Democratic Party in Union County. I mention all that because, you know, my experience with building and that kind of stuff is I'm very capable of hitting my thumb with a hammer. And that's about it, folks. But I'm here to serve, and I learned this commission, and I'm just here to, you know, help my newly adopted home in Bend. Heidi, next section is discussion of historic preservation code. Would you like to take over on that?
Sure, I can do that. The preservation code is, like you said, it's several years older now. We, with the last modification that got approved, what would be helpful, I think, you know, there are several spots and language, you know, in the code that I always struggle with, and I'm hoping, you know, this is like a subjective architectural review committee, and so when somebody contacts me and says, hey, I'm going to submit an application, it'd be really helpful if we could talk as a group, you as a group, and give me feedback and guidance on how the commission feels about some of the subjective criteria. For example, you know, retention of original historic materials, such as the windows. I mean, some of those lines in the sand and code languages that, as you have seen, you know, we have one code for both districts and also for individually listed properties. And there are different neighborhoods, and, you know, it's different when you're talking about an individual piece of property, but just to, you know, go over some of those, that would be really helpful for me to give guidance and support for somebody who's going to be coming in front of you, or for me to, when I'm working on an administrative decision. And in support of some of the subjective, you know, criteria, I've tried to get grant funds where we've got some restoration and preservation grant programs that we have to help people. It's a drop in the bucket sometimes with the cost and everything, but it is that way. And for example, with the windows, you know, that it's a, you know, point of contention of when, you know, how many reports from a window restoration person do you get when there's hardly anybody here in town? I've been able to have a window restoration person come and do a workshop for the neighbors that were free, you know, to help support people that might want a little DIY, do the work themselves, and, you know, restore and retain the property. So those are the kinds of things. I don't know if you want to individually jump in if there are certain sections of the codes, but those are some of the areas that I struggle with all the time.
Okay, and I would like to go around real quick, like if you do have a particular area of the code that you would like to bring up, and we may have to put it into the parking lot in order to save time. I'm at 7:53 right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Jerry, what if we just walk through, focused on 10.20.130, the design review criteria, and just walk through each section, starting with citing.
130? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We
And
can
really
do it that way.
focus the time we have left on the design review criteria, kind of based on what Heidi was asking, because I think that's really where our subjectivity is going to come in, and walk through each section, and talk, like, some of them are probably pretty clear, right? And then there's going to be others around landscape or building height or windows where we can go deeper into a discussion as a group.
130, okay. I got her.
That'd be great.
Citing was that first one in there. I underlined, when I went through this, I underlined the words compatible with adjacent historic buildings and with the historic character of the surrounding area. That can certainly bring contention, can it? Not too long ago, we had, what were they, Heidi, Robin? Food carts, right? And I think, and those food carts that are over on Colorado, Arizona.
Yep.
And I'll admit, I was adamant. I could not see how a food cart was compatible with adjacent historic buildings, but they're there because they matched all of the code. The broadness of the phraseology, compatible with adjacent historic buildings. Problems with that, historic character surrounding area. What does that really mean?
Well, back in 05 or 06, Don Stevens, myself, and one other commissioner went over to Eugene for a planning. It was basically training, but specific for historic. What I was talking about when it comes to compatibility within a neighborhood, if you have a street that is, the entirety of the houses are basically built within what could now be the setback zone, that landmarks would look at a building that is built not to the standards the city looks at or looks for, but to keep it compatible with the massing and the setback of the majority of historic district streets. So if you've got a 5-foot setback on the front, your landmarks at the time was more inclined to say, well, we disagree with the city setback 20. We support this being built to the compatibility of the historic nature. There are neighborhoods or parts of Old Town where putting in sidewalks for the connectivity that the city looks at, the sidewalks would destroy some of the features of the Old Town neighborhood. While they may be, it's that trade-off we always struggle with. But from a compatibility standpoint, the development patterns would often be that the corners of the blocks had the more prominent homes. The infill within that block would be the lesser homes, especially in the Old Town where it was the mill workers. When we worked to establish that district, I was one of 6 of the rabble-rousers who met in the street just to bring that district about. And we looked at what it is that made Old Town, and it was not McMansions. So the massing and the compatibility was something that we looked at the time. It was, we were right on the cusp of time of having the 2-bed, 1-bath being torn down to make the McMansion. And we wanted to find a way to keep that character downtown. So that part of it, the compatibility, not necessarily, are they going to paint the house orange? It's more about what was the development pattern at the time that created this district, and how do we maintain that while giving a nod to modern, zoning and planning.
Okay. The word the phrase compatibility, and that is certainly broad. And Derek, if I heard you right, you're saying that there are times when the historic or when the Landmarks Commission, I'll use the word ignore, but it's not ignore. Ignores the development code.
Absolutely. I mean, we just saw it at the Putnam House, the idea that the garage need to be moved because of the code having changed.
Right.
I don't agree with that. All through Old Town and a lot of places on Congress in the alleys or in the Congress district, you have garages that are built right to the alley to maximize the feel. Those alleyscapes have a feel and a look that is part of our charge to maintain. You know, we heard tonight from the applicant that his garage was secondary and didn't really count. Actually, the entirety of it is a National Registry site. Everything that's on the site prior to, 50 years old or older is part and parcel of an historic site. So in looking at the development patterns of the 20s and 30s, we're looking at the fact that they maximize their space. They put the garages right on the alleys or right on the line. And that's what we need to push for when it comes to maintaining that compatibility within the neighborhood and that standard, even if it in the face, or perhaps with a code rewrite, addresses the fact that this is how it is in these historic districts, and the city of Bend need recognize that we have something that maintains the history and the specialness of downtown. And by ignoring or enforcing modern standards to it doesn't really work.
Okay.
So
Other comments?
just to kind of, move us along and, something of the parking lot. I mean, what I'm hearing here is, compatible specifically is the word that, has some subjectivity to it. And it's probably worth a discussion or maybe we even parking lot, at least through these discussions, areas where we want to dive deeper in future work sessions and possibly recommend code changes to the city council. And this might be an area where we want to be more specific because compatible actually is too gray. We might need to outline specifically what compatible means here.
And, when it comes to things like windows, I also found that those areas to be very, very broad in nature as well. Maybe one of the parking lot issue, Heidi, is to go ahead and take a look at the broad nature of some of our phrasing and some of the codes, and maybe see if or recommend ways to tighten that up. Other comments on that topic?
Yeah, to me, the wording here is okay. It's okay to be broad here to get more specific as we go down the list here. But, I've been in the commission since 2012. And I'd say, looking at that wording, the one that has come up the most often, and not many times, but is the new additions. Somebody wanting to propose a new addition that really is different from the main house or not compatible with what else is there. The prime example of what not to do is that house on Broadway that has that huge addition in the back. It's kind of behind the library. And right, and a block away from it, or right next to it, is a house that has a nice addition in the back that the Landmarks Commission, while I was on, worked on. That fits nicely. It's a good side-by-side example of what to do and what not to do. But I think the time I've been here, that, and I think additions come into play a little further down also, as we get more specific.
David, you want to make a comment?
I was just going to say maybe, maybe we expand upon the definitions of compatible, right? My wife and I describe it like this: my strengths, her weaknesses, right? And vice versa. Like literally goes in and the gear turns. It's like we're perfectly compatible, even though we're polar opposites on every personality test or however you'd want to gauge kind of individuals. So maybe we just help define the word compatible. I did want to ask, because we were on the subject of the garage and the lot line, has a commission, and this might be for Heidi or you or someone else, have we ever modified a secondary structure? Like going all the way back?
Point of clarity. How do you mean? Just
So
somebody
like,
came.
like we did today, we voted for essentially an extension along the lot line on a secondary structure, which is the garage. So
Right.
I'm just wondering, has that ever been done before?
Yeah. Sizemore, there's a garage that was modified with the landmark's approval to actually become an airplane hangar. There was an addition put onto it on the rear so that the tail of the plane would fit inside the garage. That was back maybe 06, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Off my head.
Jim?
Yeah, two things. I mean, one, probably for the parking lot, which would be, Heidi, something for city council to consider is perhaps, it would be a code change to grant the planning or the historic commission a little more authority to deal with setbacks in historic districts, so that rather than saying, okay, we like what you're doing, go to another agency and get them to like it.
And then wait 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, and
That's out of our hands.
I think the other thing is, having served on commissions where with lots of, I guess, interpretive language, like compatible, you really have to rely on precedent as to what is compatible. And you have to look at the whole. If it's a historic district, if it's not a historic house, but it's in a historic district, what is compatible, as opposed to the house itself is historic, what makes it historic, and what's compatible with that period of history and what it's supposed to be representing. And it's why commissions have multiple people on them, because it is highly subjective and it's really hard to define subjective terms. I've been involved in multiple code rights in other jurisdictions, and every time people try to define a broad term, they get themselves into a mess. Example, I worked on one of Portland Park's early strategic plans. And it was a group that, had people from administration, from operations, from planning design, from recreation. And one day we spent 4 hours trying to define the meaning of work. Because it meant something different to everybody. And we all bring baggage to language based on our experience and perceptions. And that's part of that working out, what does compatible mean? And I think you have to then look at the context, you have to look at precedent, and it's why not having an entire commission turnover at once is a good thing to have, so that there is some continued personal history or precedent history, and having staff that maintain that history about, has this ever been done before? What is the consideration? I think, because, history happens every second of the day and things are changing. And so, precedents and compatible today may not be compatible tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. I've got 8:07 and I'd like to wrap this up in about 10 minutes. So as you run through 10.20.130 and the different areas, where do you see the problems? What, real quick, like what problems, areas do you see? Windows, of course, are always a bone of contention for us. Do you see garages and carports as a bone of contention?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that for windows, it's not really about the windows, at least for me, right? It's whether or not what the applicant has chosen, right? So if the applicant has chosen not to do restoration, that's not the path that he's going down. We don't have to worry about that. He's going for replacement. Make it easier for him to go down that path and replace. That's it. And just so we don't have homeowners spending too much money on permits and waiting too long to get the work done. That was my big issue last month. It was really more about, wait a minute, this guy decided to replace his windows. Why can't he just travel down that path, right?
And the idea and the notion of historically designed and historic preserved or rehabilitated windows, as long as I've been on the commission, has always been a source of discussion.
Right.
It always been. Anything else?
Real quick, secondary structures. It is.
Yeah, garages.
Every time something comes up with these, it is, especially in addition, the garage is a massive problem in terms of helping these people get the designs that they need in order to rehabilitate the homes.
Okay. Yeah, and that came up with the garage on this project, a two-car garage, one-car garage. I did see somewhere in the code that talked about one-car garages. And I would have to scramble right now to find where it was. So maybe that's something that we want to take a closer look at, garage and garage sizes, maybe put that in a parking lot to discuss at a later date. As you run through it, exterior features, foundations, because I would like to jump into the fourth section and how we see our role as commissioners. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, one thing, again, maybe for future discussion, I think the actual language of, applying the code seemed to me to be fairly straightforward. I think where we get into trouble and something we may want to look at is the definition section. What are the definitions of the terms we use when applying the code? I mean, in that issue a month ago on the window replacement, part of the issue of the code is practical. One of the words in that section is
right. Is where it's practical.
So when is it practical? And that's why I think, the city and writers asked for multiple opinions from experts on what is practical. Is it practical to restore or replace, or I think the language I was just glancing at is rehabilitate? What's practicality and how are we defining that? And by looking at later at our definitions and getting some consensus about what that means when we use a particular term, it may make it easier or achieve a little bit more consensus in moving forward about the application of practicality or compatibility.
Yeah, it would be nice if we had for this commission a matrix or a rubric that was very narrowly defined, and we could just go to left, right, and it's right there, and that's the definition we need. But our code isn't written that way, and I'm not sure we want it to be that cut and dried.
Yeah.
Derek.
If we had that, they wouldn't need a commission.
They wouldn't need a commission. No, Heidi would just go to a matrix. Derek?
I'm struck by some of the conversations in that I come back to the Latin caveat emptor. People bought a historic home. And in doing so, it enters into a, if you will, a bit of a social contract that we in the bigger picture have determined that this slice of history of our town is worth saving and preserving. And the idea that you start by restoring rather than replacing, the idea of wholesale replacements it flies in the face of everything that we actually try and do in preserving the historic nature, because modern windows do not look like old windows. There's a project on Delaware that Heidi brought me down to have a look at something, and the windows were built with sealed insulative glass units, but the exterior looks exactly right. The dimensions and proportions, everything were perfect. Some of the best I've ever seen. And it's a great example of how somebody who is not necessarily in my time with landmarks before getting off of it and now coming back on. Windows have always been a problem. The idea that a vinyl window is going to be appropriate is not the case. That there are those who just believe that new is better than old, and yet they bought an historic building.
Yeah.
And that's the balance. That's the struggle that I've seen in my time on landmarks. There are ways to do things. The National Registry talks about it. Our code talks about it. We're here to help preserve, not just let people do what they need to do or think they need to do. Again, caveat emptor.
Okay,
Derek,
Derek, do you see that as your role on the commission? I'm going to move into the fourth area. Do you see that as part of who you are as far as your input into the commission?
A curmudgeon? I'm trying to figure what you're.
Well, I'll use the word curmudgeon if you want me to.
I don't have a problem with that. But no, I think that I've lived in Bend for, a quarter of a century, and I've watched Bend change over the years, and I've watched what we've lost. I was unfortunately on the commission when the crane shed was torn down at night by Visigoths. I don't think that we can, with the development patterns that we have in Bend, afford to lose any more of our history and still maintain a town that we all came to because it was quaint.
Okay.
Pushing for preservation rather than wholesale change for the sake of change is something that I'm happy to run with. So yeah.
Okay, David, I'm gonna go down to you now. Go ahead.
all right, so I was going to ask Commissioner Stevens if he's available for a cup of coffee someday. Because what I want to do is take you and every other commissioner out on a little tour, just to Drake Park. I'll meet you at, and Heidi, you're included as well if you want coffee and Dave's tour of Drake Park and a bit of Old Town.
Sure.
I can take you through and show you what preservation for the sake of preservation is costing people in Bend, right? Individual homeowners. And
okay.
why there's almost nothing worth preserving, right? Both districts were created on almost identical platforms. Old Town to prevent quick access and larger streets going to the mill.
Mm-hmm.
Drake Park was created to prevent the development that was happening on Galveston from coming up on Tumalo Avenue, right? But both of those premises are now gone. So what are we exactly preserving, right? And it really should be, and this is a question, right? Should we even have a district? Both of them. I mean, I hope so, yes. But I really think that we've got to be moving towards excellence in architecture and not preservation for preservation's sake, because what we're getting is in the middle of the night demolitions of all of Old Town, right? People are pulling an interior rehab permit for electrical, right, to change an outlet. And what they're doing is stripping the entire building, re-siding it, putting in new windows, and then changing the electrical outlet and having the inspector come out and say, yep, electrical outlet, thank you very much, and they're out the door.
Okay.
So that preservation for preservation's sake,
okay,
we really have got to look at.
Thank you for those comments, David. How about can I move on for a real quick and then we'll come back, okay?
I wanted to mention one thing procedurally.
Go ahead.
What is a quorum for our commission? Is it 4 or 3?
Three commissioners.
If it's 3, I don't know if a majority of commissioners that could be a quorum, which is 2 commissioners, can meet outside of a meeting. Just a point to think about without violating Oregon's open meeting law. But
2 is fine, 3 is bad. So
well, 3 is a quorum. It may be the majority of a quorum. I might have to look into that. But yeah, for me, just quickly, for me, I mentioned The three topics I'd like to cover would be, besides windows, sizes of additions, and we'd like whether we should have an addition to the code for what we decided tonight on whether there ought to be an exception, something different, a different look at additions to a National Historic building.
Okay, thank you. Heidi, you got, okay. Terry, some kind of role of commissioner's role, how you see it, and wrap up kind of comment? You're muted.
Yeah. So maybe just quickly to add then on our last topic today, I really feel like, obviously we are here to provide our expertise related to when the historic preservation code is subjective, but it is also limited to the historic preservation code. So I think that I've seen in some of our deliberations and discussions a lot of personal opinion on applicant's credibility or an application's, design or whatnot. And I have lots of personal opinions too. And I'd love to extend every meeting and share every thought I have about every application. But I really feel limited in the scope specifically of the commission and of our role as commissioners to the historic preservation code. So that's my opinion. We are limited to this. I study this compared to what is submitted, and I prepare my comments and research related and limited only to the historic preservation code. That's my opinion.
And that's what Ian has said to us a couple of times when we've had him as part of work sessions. Andy, how about you?
Yeah, I think we need a little bit more specificity about windows. And I think that it's just kind of become tribal knowledge that you don't go to the commission with this proposal. I think that there are applicants that come and they're completely blindsided by the fact that we're telling them to not replace windows. So I think the uncertainty when people come to the commission and they think one thing and they should have some of that information in the code up front. And we don't really discuss windows except as it relates to architectural elements in the code. The neighborhood had, on my block, there have been, windows that have been replaced without any permits. And if there's that happening, I don't necessarily complain about it, but I think we're kind of treating all windows equally. And I think that when we look at windows from, maybe the rear or not street facing part of a residential versus like a more distinctive window design, like in the Amity Creek Elementary School, there is some distinction I think needs to be made with the historical value of the element that we're trying to preserve, and I think that should be in the code. So I'm happy to, bring a liaison from the Old Bend neighborhood association and get kind of bring the involvement from my fellow neighborhood association, which is very much affected by this, and solicit their input.
Okay, so the idea of bringing someone from the neighborhood association in to talk a little bit about windows themselves. All right, Jim?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would agree with
Wrap up?
I would agree with Terry that the role of the commission is to apply the code. And that's first and foremost. And I think that's why it's important to look at the definitions of what preservation means in the code as opposed to rehabilitation or replacement. I think there's a difference, just to go back to the whole windows thing, between a non-historic house in a historic district and a historic house. When the house itself or property has a specific designation, then the nature of window replacement restoration may be more important. If it's a house in a historic district that contributes by its general size and form, but there is nothing specifically historic about the house itself, then the nature of the materiality of the windows may be less important. And that's why you have a commission, is to discuss the nuances of what that means.
Okay, thank you. I'm 14 minutes over my goal time, and I'm running out of battery. I forgot to plug my iPad in, and so I'm down to about 10% power. So I'm going to leave whether I want to real soon or not. Just to wrap this all up, thank you very much for the monthly meeting and our work on that project. Thank you very much for your input with the work session tonight. Heidi, I think you've got an awful lot of, your parking lot got filled, didn't it? Yeah, okay. Anything that you want to contribute that that you didn't get in tonight, or you think about between now and next month, we can go ahead and pick that up then in our May meeting, okay? Final comment from me then, again, is a great big thank you. Thank you for serving on the commission and for being you. I found out an awful lot about each and every one of you tonight. Hopefully we can go from here and we can iron out some of our differences and come to positions based on the code, of course, and we can move forward with other projects. Heidi, final thing to add?
No, not at this point. I look forward to next meeting to continuing this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, folks. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You all. Talk
Good
to you
night.
next month.
We're off.